Hello, everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. The first time I noticed it, I told myself it was just fatigue. That's what you do in Alaska when something doesn't make sense. You blame the cold, the darkness, the long stretches of nothing. You convince yourself your brain is trying to entertain itself because there's nothing else out here but wind and white. I was working a winter rotation on the western coast, outside Nome, contracted to maintain communications equipment for a small cluster of research cabins and fuel depots that sat scattered along the edge of tundra. It wasn't glamorous, it was just steady money and isolation you could measure in miles. The nearest town was a couple hours away by snow machine on a good day. Most days weren't good. Our crew was small, 3 of us, because the job was simple on paper. Keep the generator arrays running, keep the satellite uplinks stable, keep the emergency beacons tested. If anything failed out there, it didn't just inconvenience someone, it stranded them. My lead was a woman named Darla, the kind of person who could rebuild a carburetor with gloves on. And our third was Jonah, quiet and steady, always counting bolts and always checking the weather like it owed him money. The system we maintained was basically a lifeline. One main cabin with an old diesel generator, a radio rack, and a satellite phone bolted to the wall like a relic. Every outpost along the coast depended on that phone. The first weird thing happened on a Tuesday night. The kind of night where you couldn't tell if it was 7 p.m. or 2 a.m. because the sky never really changed, just different shades of dark. We were finishing a routine battery swap when the sat phone rang. That shouldn't happen. The number wasn't published. The few people who had it were our supervisor in Anchorage and the state emergency line that routed through a private system. If anyone called, it meant something serious. Darla picked up immediately, and I watched her posture change as she listened. She didn't speak for a few seconds, just stared at the wall like she was hearing something far away. Then she said, "Repeat that." She listened again, and I saw her grip tighten on the handset. "What number did you dial?" A pause. Then, "No, don't do that. Stay on your end." She hung up without saying goodbye. Jonah looked up from his tools. What was it? Darla stared at the phone like it had just moved on its own. "It was a guy," she said slowly. He sounded out of breath, like he'd been running. "Who?" I asked. Darla shook her head once. He wouldn't say. He kept repeating a number. I waited for her to laugh, to roll her eyes and say it was some wrong call, but she didn't. "What number?" Jonah asked. Darla swallowed. 917. That meant nothing to me. I was about to say so when the sat phone rang again. Same sharp, old-fashioned ring, too loud in the cabin's silence. Darla didn't pick up this time. Jonah did. He raised the handset to his ear and said, "This is the Nome Coastal Station. Identify yourself." He listened. His face changed in the same way Darla's had, like something invisible had leaned closer. He turned slightly away from us, as if he didn't want the voice to spill into the room. Then he said, "You're calling us. How did you get this number?" A pause. Jonah's throat bobbed once. "What?" he asked. Another pause. His eyes flicked to the wall clock above the radio rack, and I followed his gaze without thinking. The clock read 1:16 a.m. Jonah lowered his voice into the phone. "Sir, are you at one of the outposts?" He listened longer, nodding once almost automatically like he was responding to something hypnotic. Then he said, "Say that again." I saw his fingers tighten to ground the handset. 917, Jonah repeated softly, like he was tasting it. His gaze drifted, slowly, unwillingly, toward the small window above the generator controls. The glass was frosted, the world outside erased to pale gray, but I still felt the urge to look out, like my eyes were being pulled. Jonah whispered into the phone, "Why?" He went silent again. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, he said, "There's nobody out there." Darla's face snapped toward him. Jonah kept listening, his mouth slightly open. Finally he said, Okay, listen to me. Do not come here. Stay where you are," and the line went dead. No click, no static fade, just dead. Jonah held the handset for a second longer, like he didn't trust that the line had actually ended. Then he set it down slowly, carefully, like the phone might shatter. "What did he say?" I asked. Jonah didn't answer right away. He kept staring at the window. Then he said he was outside. Darla's eyebrows lifted. Outside where? Jonah's lips moved like he had to force the words out. Outside this cabin, right now. That made my stomach drop, because the three of us had been in there for hours. If someone was outside, we would have heard something. Boots, windbreak, the crunch of snow. Unless they didn't move like that. Darla grabbed her headlamp and unhooked the shotgun from its rack. Standard up here, not dramatic, just practical. She didn't chamber around yet. She just held it like a tool she hoped she wouldn't need. "Both of you stay behind me," she said. The back door was closest to the generator shed, and if someone was outside, the front would be the only place they could stand without getting blasted by exhaust heat. Darla still chose the back door, because Darla always moved like she was playing chess. She cracked it open. Wind rushed in, sharp and dry. Snow blew sideways in the beam of her headlamp, and there were no tracks, not a single footprint. No marks, no drag, no disturbance, just smooth snow like it had been freshly laid over everything. But the thing that made Darla freeze wasn't what we saw, it was what we heard. A thin, steady sound, like breathing, coming from somewhere just out of the headlamp's reach. Not heavy panting, not the wind, breathing. Darla held the beam steady, sweeping it left, then right. Nothing. The breathing continued for a few more seconds. Then it stopped, and the sat phone rang again behind us. Darla didn't move. Jonah and I both flinched because the sound felt wrong now, like it was part of whatever was happening outside. The phone kept ringing. I stepped back into the cabin, reached for the handset, and hesitated. There was a part of me that knew, absolutely knew, that whoever was calling wanted me to pick up. Not because they needed help, because they wanted to see if they could make me do it. I lifted the handset anyway, and a voice, calm and close, said, 917. I swallowed. "Who is this?" A pause. Then the voice said something that made the air feel suddenly thin. "Tell Darla, don't look behind the fuel drums." My eyes snapped to Darla. She hadn't told anyone her name on the radio, not today, not that week, not in any log I'd seen. And behind the fuel drums was the only patch of ground our headlamp beam hadn't reached yet. The voice continued, still calm, still close. "It's going to happen at 9:17. Then the line went dead again. I lowered the handset slowly. Darla stared at me, and I realized my hands were shaking so hard the phone cord was rattling against the wall. "What did it say?" she asked. I took one breath, and then I told her. Darla didn't hesitate. She shut the back door with a controlled, quiet motion, like she didn't want whatever was outside to know we'd heard it. Then she walked to the front of the cabin and flipped the deadbolt into place, even though we were already locked in. It was the kind of gesture you make when your hands need something to do.
Jonah moved to the radio rack, checking channels out of reflex, like a voice on the air might fix what a voice on the phone had just broken. I stood where I was, still holding the handset, staring at the sat phone like it could ring again just because I expected it to. Darla said, "What time is it?" Jonah looked up at the wall clock. 8:18. Darla nodded once, as if she'd just confirmed a terrible math problem. "So we've got 8 hours. 8 hours until what?" I asked, though I already hated the answer. Darla's eyes stayed on me. "Until 9:17. That was the first moment it occurred to me that the voice hadn't said 9:17 a.m. or p.m. It hadn't clarified because it didn't need to. Out here, time blurred, but clocks didn't. Jonah said, "This is stupid. It's probably someone messing with us." But his voice was thin, like he didn't believe himself. Darla stared at the frost-streaked window again. "We're not alone out here. That part's not up for debate." She stepped toward the generator controls, checked fuel levels, then checked them again like the numbers might change if she looked hard enough. The cabin was warm, the heater running, but my skin felt cold anyway. Darla said, "We're not going outside again." Jonah opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, pride or logic, I couldn't tell. But then he stopped, because the truth was, even if you were brave, you weren't stupid. Outside in that weather, in that isolation, you didn't take risks for no reason. "Let's call Anchorage, have them trace the number," Jonah said. I looked at him. Can they trace a sat phone call? Jonah didn't answer right away. He just started punching buttons, trying to dial the supervisor line. When he hit send, the sat phone chirped, then returned a dull error tone. "Line's busy," he said. Darla frowned. "Busy? It's a dedicated line." Jonah tried again. Same tone. He tried the emergency line. Same. "Okay," he forced a laugh that sounded like a cough. "That's, not great." Darla leaned down and opened a drawer beneath the radio rack. She pulled out the logbook, flipped to the most recent page. The entries were routine. Generator check, battery swap, weather notes. She set the book down and wrote something new in block letters, pressing the pen hard enough to tear the paper.
She stared at the words after she wrote them. Then she closed the logbook like she didn't want to see it anymore. Jonah said, "Fuel drums. We should check behind them." Darla's eyes snapped to him. "No." Jonah gestured toward the front window. "Darla, if there's something behind them, we need to know." Darla's jaw flexed. "You want to do what the voice told us to do? You want to play its game?" Jonah opened his mouth, then shut it. His shoulders rose and fell once. I said, "What if it wasn't a warning? What if it was bait?" Darla looked at me like she'd been thinking that same thing and didn't want to say it out loud. The cabin settled into a kind of unnatural quiet. The generator hummed, the heater clicked. Somewhere in the walls, the building creaked as wind pushed against it. Outside, the world was erased. That was the worst part. If you could see the tundra, if you could see the distance and the emptiness, it would feel like safety. But when everything was swallowed by snow and darkness, it felt like the whole world was pressed up against the glass. At 2 a.m., the sat phone rang again. 1 ring, 2, then stopped. We all froze, breathing shallow. A full minute passed. Then the phone rang again, 2 rings this time, and stopped. Jonah whispered, "It's testing us." Darla didn't respond. She just stared at it, eyes narrowed, as if to intimidate the phone into silence. At 2:47 a.m., a time that meant nothing to us yet, but still made my spine go tight, the lights flickered, just once, like a blink. The cabin's fluorescent strips stuttered, then steadied. But when they came back bright, I knew something had changed. I couldn't explain it. There was no smell, no sound,
No movement, just a shift, like the room was the same, but the air inside it was slightly heavier. Darla noticed too. She slowly turned her head toward the window. The frost patterns were different, not melted, not scraped, different, as if something warm had been pressed against the outside glass long enough to change the way ice formed. Jonah stepped closer. That wasn't like that before. Darla held up a hand. Don't. But Jonah was already leaning in, squinting at the glass, trying to see through the white film. Then he stopped, his head tilted slightly, like he was listening. "What?" I asked. Jonah didn't look at me. He said softly, almost like he didn't want to disrupt whatever he was hearing. "Knocking." We all held our breath, and then I heard it too. Not loud, not aggressive, a soft, deliberate tapping, like a knuckle against metal. From the side of the cabin. 1, 2, 3, then silence. My eyes flicked to the deadbolt like it might slide open on its own. Then the tapping came from the front door. 1, 2, 3, then silence. My eyes flicked to the deadbolt like it might slide open on its own. Then the tapping came from the window above the fuel drums. Darla's gaze snapped there. That window faced the side yard where the drum stacks lay half buried in snow. They were used for deliveries. We hadn't touched them in days. There was no reason to go near them. The tapping happened again. 3 knocks, slow and measured. Then it stopped. Darla didn't move, Jonah didn't move, but my eyes drifted, without permission, toward the front window where we could see the faint outline of the fuel drum stacks in the storm glow from our porch light. There was barely visibility, but there was enough to see that one of the drums was slightly out of line. Not much, just off, like it had been moved. I swallowed. Darla noticed my stare. Don't. I forced myself to look away, but once you notice something like that, it becomes a question you can't stop asking. Did we stack them that way? Did the wind shift it, or did something out there touch it? At 3:10 a.m., the sat phone rang again. This time, it didn't stop after 2 rings. It kept going, and the sound started to feel less like an alert and more like a pressure, filling the cabin, pushing into my skull. Darla crossed the room and ripped the power cord out of the wall. The phone went dead instantly. The silence afterwards was almost worse. Jonah exhaled shakily. Okay, good. Darla stared at the unplugged phone. If it rings again, she stopped because she didn't have to finish the thought. If it rang again without power, then the rules we understood didn't apply. We sat in silence for a long time after that. Nobody slept. Every time the cabin creaked, my muscles jumped. Every time the wind gusted, I waited for footsteps to appear beneath it.
Around 5:30 a.m., Jonah broke. He didn't scream, he didn't panic. He just stood up abruptly and said, "I'm going to check the drums." Darla rose at the same time, blocking his path. "No!" Jonah's eyes were red. "We can't just sit here until 9:17. We need to know what's out there." Darla held his gaze. "And if what's out there wants you to come outside, what do you think happens when you do?" Jonah clenched his jaw. "At least we'll be doing something." Darla's voice dropped lower. Doing something is not always the same as doing the right thing. Jonah pushed past her anyway. He grabbed his parka from the hook. Darla caught his sleeve. "Jonah!" He shook her off. "I'll be quick. I'll just look. I'll be back in 2 minutes." And then he unlatched the front door. The wind punched in immediately, filling the cabin with snow dust. Jonah stepped out into the white. Darla stood at the threshold, shotgun in her hands, yelling after him, not with fear, but with fury. "Jonah, stay in sight!"
Jonah waved without turning around. He walked straight toward the fuel drums. I pressed my face to the window, trying to see through the frost. His shape became a gray smear in the storm glow. He reached the first row of drums. He paused. He leaned forward, and then, this is the part that still doesn't fit in my head, he stepped behind them, disappearing from view as if he'd walked behind a wall. Darla swore and shoved the door wider. "Jonah!" she yelled. No answer. I heard her boots hit snow as she stepped out. I shouted, "Darla, don't!" But she was already going. Then she stopped abruptly, not because she'd changed her mind, because she'd seen something. I saw it too. The snow between the door and the drums was pristine. No tracks, no sign Jonah ever existed outside that cabin. The wind had smoothed the snow into a perfect untouched sheet. If someone had walked out there after Jonah disappeared, we would have seen it. If something had dragged him, there would have been a disturbance. There was nothing. It was like the world had edited him out. I checked my watch, then the wall clock again. They matched. 7:14 a.m. 2 hours and 3 minutes left. Darla broke the silence. "He shouldn't have vanished like that." I nodded. "No." She swallowed. "I've seen guys freeze. I've seen people get disoriented, walk off, fall into drifts. This wasn't that." Her eyes lifted to mine. This was clean. That word stuck with me. Clean. At 8:02, the generator hiccuped. Just a brief sputter, like a throat clearing, then it smoothed out again. But the sound hit both of us like a shock. Darla stood immediately, checking gauges, fuel flow, exhaust temp. "All good," she muttered. "Everything is normal." Nothing about this felt normal. At 8:19, the sat phone, still unplugged, rang. One sharp ring, then silence. Darla stared at it. I backed away from the wall without realizing I was moving. "That's not possible," I said. Darla didn't answer. At 8:30, the knocking came back, not from outside this time, from beneath the floor. 3 slow taps, then nothing. I felt the hair on my arms lift. "That's the crawl space," I whispered. Darla shook her head immediately. No access from outside. Only hatches inside, and it's sealed." As if summoned by the thought, something shifted beneath our feet. Not a thud, a repositioning, like someone adjusting their weight. Darla raised the shotgun, pointing it at the floor without aiming at anything specific. Her voice was steady, but barely. "Whatever you want," she said aloud, "you're not getting it." The silence that followed felt deliberate, waiting. At 9:05 a.m., the air pressure changed. I can't explain it better than that. My ears popped slightly, like we'd gained altitude without moving. The heater kicked off, then back on, struggling like it was compensating for something unseen. Darla whispered, "It's close." The wall clock ticked louder than it should have. 9:12. The sat phone rang again. This time it rang continuously. No pause, no testing, just ringing. Darla didn't unplug it. She already had. The sound wasn't coming from the speaker. It was coming from everywhere. Then a voice spoke, not through the phone, but through the cabin itself. 9, 1, 7. The words weren't loud. They were intimate, like someone leaning close enough that you could feel their breath. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. Darla shouted, "No!" The voice continued, calm and patient. "Time to look." The floor hatch creaked. Darla spun, aiming the shotgun directly at it. The hatch didn't open. It just shifted slightly, like pressure was being applied from below. Then the clock hit 9:17. Every sound stopped. The generator died. The heater cut out. The ringing ceased. The cabin went dead silent. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the hatch slid open, not violently, carefully. A hand appeared on the edge, gray, bare, too still. Darla fired. The blast was deafening in the confined space. Wood splintered. Dust filled the air. The hand was gone. The hatch slammed shut. The lights flickered back on. The generator roared to life like it had never stopped. Outside, the wind picked up again, erasing the moment like it had never happened. We stood there, frozen, breathing hard, waiting for something else. Nothing came. An hour later, Anchorage finally got through. Search teams arrived by afternoon. They found Jonah's parka folded neatly behind the fuel drums. No footprints, no blood, no body. The official report said he wandered off and succumbed to the elements. Darla and I were flown out 2 days later. We never worked together again. I still think about that number, because a year after I left Alaska, I checked an old maintenance map out of curiosity. The coastal station's grid reference? Sector 917. And sometimes late at night, when my phone rings and no one's on the line, I let it stop ringing.
Story 2. The Man Who Waited by the Runway Lights. The first thing you notice in western Alaska during winter isn't the cold. It's the quiet. Not the peaceful kind people imagine when they think of snow and open land, but a thick, swallowing silence that presses in on you until every sound feels too loud and every thought feels too sharp. I was 34 when this happened, working as a night operations coordinator at a small regional airstrip outside Nome, Alaska. The kind of place that exists less for convenience and more because people would die without it. Medical flights, supply drops, emergency landings. That airstrip saved lives, and some nights it felt like something else was using it too. I'd taken the job because it paid well and because I needed the distance. After my divorce, Alaska felt far enough away from everything I'd messed up. I worked nights because I preferred them. Less chatter, fewer questions, fewer people. Most shifts were identical. Check the weather feeds, monitor the runway lights, log incoming or outgoing bush planes, drink bad coffee, and watch snow slide sideways past the windows. That January, storms had been stacking up one after another. Flights were delayed, rerouted, or outright canceled. By the third week, I hadn't seen a plane land after midnight in days, which is why I noticed him. It was just after 1 a.m. when I saw movement near the far end of the runway. At first, I assumed it was an illusion, snow blowing just right, headlights reflecting wrong. I leaned closer to the window, wiping frost from the glass with my sleeve. There was a person standing out there. No vehicle, no reflective vest, no radio.
Just a man bundled in a heavy coat facing the runway lights. He stood perfectly still. My first thought was hypothermia. People did stupid things in the cold, wandered, got lost, made it halfway somewhere, and froze before they realized they were in trouble. I grabbed my radio. Ground to ops. Anyone on the field? Static. I checked the exterior cameras. The image flickered but held. There he was. The man stood directly beneath runway light 12, the amber glow casting long shadows across the snow. His back was to the tower. He hadn't moved an inch. I tried the radio again, louder this time. Nothing. That's when I realized something small but deeply wrong. There were no footprints. The snow around him was smooth, wind-blown, yes, but undisturbed, like he'd been placed there instead of walking in. I pulled on my parka and stepped outside, the cold punching the breath out of my lungs instantly. The air smelled metallic, sharp enough to sting. "Sir, you can't be out here." He didn't react. I took a few careful steps closer, boots crunching loudly against the snow. Still nothing. When I was maybe 30 feet away, he spoke. "I'm early." The voice was calm, too calm, flat like it had been practiced. "Early for what?" I asked. He tilted his head slightly, just enough that I could see the edge of his face beneath the hood. "The landing." My stomach tightened. "There are no flights scheduled. You need to come inside. You're going to freeze." He shook his head once. "It's always scheduled." I raised my radio, thumb hovering over the emergency channel. "Sir, I'm calling this in." "That won't help," he said. I took another step. That's when the runway lights flickered. Just a brief dip in brightness, then steady again. But every light between us pulsed in sequence, like something testing a circuit. The man turned slowly. I wish he hadn't. His face looked wrong in a way that was hard to articulate. Not decomposed, not injured, just emptied. His eyes were open but unfocused, like glass marbles reflecting light without seeing it. His skin was grayish, stretched tight across his cheeks, and his lips were cracked but moving slightly, as if he was counting under his breath. "Who are you?" I asked. He looked past me, towards the dark sky beyond the runway. "I'm the last one." A sudden gust of wind howled across the airstrip, erasing sound for a second. When it passed, he was closer. Too close. I hadn't seen him move. I backed up instinctively, heart pounding, boots sliding. "Stop!" He stopped. Exactly where the light changed from amber to red. "They always come down crooked," he said quietly. "Too low, too fast." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "February," he replied. "Long time ago." Something clicked in my memory. An accident. I remembered reading about it when I first took the job. The cargo plane, decades back, attempted an emergency landing during a whiteout, clipped the runway, tore itself apart just beyond the perimeter fence. No survivors. "The runway lights failed," I said slowly. "They said visibility dropped." He nodded once. "They did." The radio in my hand crackled to life suddenly. Not static, breathing, heavy, labored, panicked. then screaming. I dropped the radio. The man looked at me for the first time. "You should go inside," he said gently. "It's almost time." Behind him, far out over the frozen expanse, a low hum began to build. Not an engine, something deeper. The runway lights flared brighter all at once. Then every single one went out. Complete darkness. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I was inside the tower. Door slammed, bolt thrown. The lights flickered back on seconds later. Through the window, the runway was empty. No man, no footprints, no disturbance. The incident report said I'd experienced visual distortion due to fatigue and weather conditions. I quit 2 weeks later, but before I left, I pulled the old crash records. The flight number of that cargo plane? 917. And sometimes when storms roll in and the power flickers where I live now, I swear I can still hear runway lights clicking on in the dark.
Story 3. Something followed us across the frozen lake. I grew up in northern Minnesota, which meant winter wasn't a season, it was a condition. By the time this happened, I was 27 and working seasonal maintenance for a small resort near Lake Kabetogama, just south of the Canadian border. In the off-season, the place shut down almost completely. No tourists, no staff, just a handful of us, keeping the cabins from collapsing under snow and ice. That isolation never bothered me. If anything, I liked it, until one night made me understand why most people leave when the lake freezes solid. It was late January, and the ice had been thick for weeks. Locals were already driving trucks across the lake, cutting straight paths instead of taking the long way around the forest roads. My co-worker Evan and I had finished checking the generator cabins just before sunset. We were supposed to head back to the main lodge, but Evan suggested we take the shortcut across the lake. "It'll save us 40 minutes, he said, already turning the snowmobile. I hesitated, not because of the ice, it was solid, but because of the weather. The sky had gone that dull, flat gray that usually meant snow later, the kind that erased depth and distance. Still, I didn't argue. We took off across the lake, engines humming steadily, the shoreline shrinking behind us, the world flattened into white and gray, horizon dissolving until it felt like we were moving through a blank page. About 5 minutes in, Evan slowed down. I pulled up beside him and lifted my visor. "What's up?" He didn't answer right away. He was staring behind us. I turned. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I noticed movement. Far back on the lake, something dark stood out against the ice, a shape low to the ground, elongated, moving steadily in our direction. Probably a wolf, I told myself. They crossed frozen lakes sometimes, rare but not unheard of. Still, it bothered me. "Let's keep going," Evan said, voice tight. We picked up speed. The shape didn't fall behind. 5 minutes later, Evan slowed again. This time, the thing was closer. Close enough that I could tell it wasn't a wolf. It moved wrong, too smooth, too consistent, not bounding or trotting, just gliding forward in long, even strides, like it didn't need to adjust for ice at all. "What the hell is that?" I asked. Evan shook his head. "Don't know, don't care."
We gunned the engines. The wind tore at my face, eyes watering, snow stinging like needles. I focused on the faint outline of the opposite shore ahead, willing it to get closer faster. Then Evan's snowmobile sputtered. Once, twice, then the engine died. He swore loudly, skidding to a stop. I circled back, heart hammering. What happened? Fuel line, he said, already kneeling. Must have iced up. I glanced over my shoulder. The shape was closer now, much closer. It wasn't low to the ground anymore. It was standing upright. My stomach dropped. It was tall, taller than any person I'd ever seen. Long arms hanging at its sides, head tilted slightly as if studying us. No visible face from that distance, just a darker mass against the ice. Evan, I said quietly, we need to move now. I just need a minute, he muttered, hands shaking as he worked the line. The ice cracked, not beneath us, behind us, a sharp, echoing sound that rolled across the lake. The thing stopped moving. Then, impossibly, it was closer again. No footsteps, no sound, just closer. Evan stood up abruptly. Got it. The engine roared back to life. I didn't wait. I took off, Evan right behind me, engines screaming in unison. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel it, that pressure, like being watched through the back of your skull. The shoreline rushed toward us, trees resolving out of the haze just as the light began to fail completely. We hit land hard, snow spraying, and didn't stop until we reached the lodge. We shut the machines off and stood there, panting, listening. Silence. No footsteps, no cracking ice, just wind through frozen branches. We waited 10 minutes before daring to look back toward the lake. The ice was empty, smooth, unmarked. No tracks, no cracks, nothing to suggest anything had ever been there at all. We didn't talk about it that night or the next day, but a week later, Evan quit without notice, packed his things and left before dawn. Before he did, he slipped something onto my desk, a printed satellite image of the lake. He'd marked a line across it in red. He said, "That's where it stopped following us." I looked closer. The line wasn't random. It matched the old boundary of a logging road that used to cross the lake decades ago, before it collapsed under the ice during a winter storm, before 3 men disappeared. I still work winters up north, still cross frozen lakes, but I never take shortcuts anymore. And if I see something standing where it shouldn't be, I turn around.
Story 4. The knock that came from beneath the snow. The cabin wasn't mine. It belonged to my sister's in-laws, tucked into a wooded stretch near Hiley, Alaska, far enough from town that you couldn't hear traffic, only wind, trees, and the occasional crack of ice shifting in the ground. I was 41 when this happened, and I'd driven up alone in early March to clear snow and make sure the place hadn't suffered any winter damage. It was supposed to be a simple overnight job. 1 night, maybe 2 if the weather turned. The forecast said light snow. It lied. By the time I arrived, dusk had already settled in, and snow was falling hard enough to blur the edges of everything. The cabin appeared out of the white like a memory. Dark wood, unlit windows, half-buried porch. I parked, hauled my gear inside, and got the generator running. Warmth returned slowly, the kind that creeps instead of arrives.
That first evening was quiet, too quiet maybe, but I chalked it up to being alone again after a long stretch of city noise. I ate, checked the doors, and turned in early. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to a sound that didn't belong. A knock, soft, hollow, not on the door, from below. I lay there for a moment, heart starting to race, listening. Nothing. I told myself it was snow sliding off the roof or a branch brushing the foundation. Old cabins made noises. Then it happened again. 3 knocks, slow, even, directly beneath the bedroom floor. I sat up, pulse pounding. "Hello," I called out, immediately regretting it. Silence answered. I grabbed my flashlight and eased out of bed, every step deliberate. The cabin's main room was dim, shadows stretched long by the lantern on the counter. I crouched near the floor, pressing my ear down. Nothing, but the feeling didn't go away. That sense that something was right below me, separated only by a few inches of wood and frozen earth. I checked the crawl space door near the back of the cabin. It was bolted shut, rimmed with frost. No signs of disturbance. I went back to bed, telling myself exhaustion was playing tricks on me. It took a long time to fall asleep. I woke again just before dawn to knocking. This time, louder, more insistent. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more, from directly beneath the cabin. My breath came shallow as I stared at the ceiling. Then a voice spoke, muffled, distorted, like it was pushing through packed snow. "Let me in." I didn't answer, didn't move. The voice came again, closer somehow. "I'm cold." I slid out of bed and grabbed my keys, my phone, my coat. I didn't bother packing, didn't bother checking anything else. As I reached the front door, the knocking moved. It followed me, now beneath the entryway. 1 knock, then another, then a scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across wood. I yanked the door open and ran into the snow, lungs burning, boots sinking deep. I didn't stop until I reached my truck, hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to start it. As I pulled away, headlights cutting through the storm, I glanced back once. The cabin looked exactly as I'd left it. No footprints, no holes, just snow piled high around the base. Later, when I told my sister's father-in-law what happened, he went quiet. Then he told me something I hadn't known. The cabin had been rebuilt. The original one collapsed decades earlier after a late winter storm. A man staying alone had gone missing. They never found his body, just a shallow depression in the snow where the cabin once stood. I don't go back there anymore, and whenever snow piles up around my own house now, I listen carefully, because sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear knocking. Story 5. We Shouldn't Have Answered the Radio. I was 29 when I took a seasonal job running a snowcat for a private lodge outside McCall, Idaho, deep in the Payette National Forest. It wasn't Alaska, but in winter it might as well have been. Once the roads iced over, the only way in or out was by snowcat or snowmobile. No cell service, no quick help, just radio contact between staff and a satellite phone locked in the main office for real emergencies. There were 6 of us on rotation that winter. By late February, we were down to 4.
People always said they left because of the isolation, but the truth was something else had started to feel wrong up there. Subtle at first, easy to dismiss, until the radio started talking back. It happened on a Tuesday night just after midnight. I was grooming one of the upper trails alone, pushing fresh snow flat under the glow of the cab lights. The forest around me was dead quiet, branches frozen solid, the world reduced to white and black. The radio crackled. At first, I thought it was interference. Weather did that sometimes. Then a voice came through. "Cat 3, you out there?" I nearly jumped out of my seat. That was my designation, but nobody else should have been awake. The night supervisor had signed off hours earlier. "This is Cat 3, I said, forcing my voice steady. "Who's calling?" Static hissed. Then, "You're off your route." I frowned, glancing at my GPS. Negative, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. A pause, long enough that I considered turning the radio down. Then the voice came back. "That's not where you died." My stomach dropped. "Repeat that," I said sharply. Static, then a low popping sound like ice cracking. "You're past it," the voice continued calmly. "Turn around." I shut the radio off, told myself it was a prank or someone messing with frequencies from town, even though town was nearly 40 miles away and buried under snow. I finished the trail fast and headed back toward the lodge. Halfway down the slope, I saw lights ahead. Headlights, parked, right in the middle of the trail. I slowed, heart pounding. No vehicle should have been there, no tracks leading in or out. As I got closer, I realized something worse. It wasn't a vehicle. It was a snowcat, my snowcat. Same model, same markings, same bent handrail on the side I'd damaged earlier that season. It sat dark and silent, blocking the trail. I killed my engine. The forest swallowed the sound instantly. I stared at the other machine, breath fogging the windshield. The radio crackled on its own. "You found it," the voice said. My hands shook as I reached for the door latch. Then I saw movement in the cab of the other snowcat. Someone was sitting inside, slumped forward, wearing my jacket. I slammed my machine into reverse and backed down the trail so fast I nearly tipped it. I didn't stop until the lodge lights came into view, flooding the snow with yellow glow. When I ran inside, babbling about what I'd seen, the others thought I was exhausted, hallucinating, until morning. We took a group snowmobile out to the trail. There was nothing there. No second snowcat, no tracks, no sign anyone else had been on the mountain. But when I checked the maintenance logs later, my hands went numb. A snowcat had crashed on that exact trail 11 years earlier. Night shift operator, male, age 29, found frozen in the cab after a whiteout. Cause of death, exposure. I quit 2 days later. On my last night, as I packed, the radio crackled one final time. Soft, almost kind. "You're not supposed to stay past your turn." I turned the radio off and never went back.
Story 6. The tracks that circled the cabin all night. I was 36 and living alone in a rental cabin outside Talkeetna, Alaska, working remote IT support for a logistics company based in the lower 48. The place was cheap, isolated, and quiet, exactly what I wanted after a year of non-stop burnout. No neighbors within shouting distance, no traffic noise, just trees, snow, and the Susitna River a mile off through the woods. The cabin sat at the end of a plowed spur road. Past that, everything was untouched wilderness. At least, that's what I thought. The first few weeks passed without incident. I settled into a routine: work during the day, cook, read, sleep early. Winter nights stretched long and dark, but I didn't mind them until the tracks appeared. It was a Tuesday morning. I woke up around 7, made coffee, and glanced out the front window like I always did, more habit than intention. That's when I noticed the snow looked wrong. The area directly around the cabin was churned up, like something had walked circles around it for hours. Deep impressions packed down hard, forming an uneven ring that looped around the structure. Footprints. Not animal tracks. Human. I pulled on boots and stepped outside, heart pounding harder with each crunch of snow underfoot. The prints were large, bigger than mine, heavy, each step pressed deep, as if whoever made them had been carrying a lot of weight or simply didn't care in sinking in. They circled the cabin completely, over and over. I followed them cautiously, tracing the path with my eyes. The trail never approached the door, never reached the windows. It just looped around, evenly spaced, like whoever made them had been pacing, watching. I checked the road. No tracks leading in, no tracks leading out. Just the circle. I told myself it was probably a hunter or someone lost who wandered too close and turned back. Still, I called the property owner. He was quiet for a moment after I explained. Then he said, "Did they touch the cabin?" I said no, just walked around it. Another pause. "That's good," he said. "If they'd knocked, I'd tell you to leave." I laughed nervously, assuming he was joking. He wasn't. "That's happened before," he continued. "Couple winters back, same thing, tracks in circles. Guy stayed anyway." "What happened?" I asked. "He left the next day. Said someone walked around all night. Never saw them, just heard the steps." That night, I didn't sleep much. The cabin creaked as the temperature dropped. Wind hissed through the trees. Every sound felt amplified. Sometime after midnight, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Crunch, pause, crunch. They moved past the window, then faded toward the back of the cabin. I held my breath, listening to the rhythm of movement just beyond the walls. At one point, the steps stopped directly beneath my bedroom window. I waited for a knock. It never came. Instead, the footsteps resumed, slower now, dragging slightly, as if whoever it was had grown tired. They didn't stop until dawn. When sunlight finally filtered through the trees, I got up and looked outside. The tracks were there, perfectly preserved.
Another full circle added to the others. Still no prince leading away. I packed that morning. Didn't finish my coffee. Didn't clean. Didn't even shut off the generator properly. As I drove away, I checked the rear-view mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw someone standing just beyond the tree line. Tall, still, watching the road.
Story 7. The snowstorm that brought someone to our door. The town of Homer, Alaska empties out fast in winter. Tourists disappear, fishing slows, roads go quiet, and the few people who stay learn quickly not to ignore the weather. I was 33 and working nights at a small seafood processing warehouse just outside town. My shift ended at midnight, and on bad weather days I stayed with my parents in their old house overlooking the bay rather than risk the drive back to my apartment. This happened in early February, during a storm the radio kept calling manageable. It wasn't. By sunset, snow was falling sideways, thick enough to swallow the road. Power flickered twice before settling into an uneasy hum. My dad went to bed early. My mom fell asleep on the couch with the TV murmuring low. I stayed up, scrolling my phone, watching snow bury the porch light until it looked like a dim star trapped in white. Sometime after 1 a.m., the knocking started. 3 sharp knocks on the front door. Not frantic, not weak, deliberate. I froze, heart jumping straight into my throat. Nobody knocks during storms like that, not unless something is wrong. I glanced at my mom. She stirred but didn't wake. The knocking came again. 3 knocks, same rhythm. I stood slowly and moved to the window beside the door, careful not to be seen. The glass was fogged, snow plastered against it, visibility almost zero, but I could see a shape. Someone stood on the porch, tall, broad-shouldered, head bare despite the storm. I cracked the door an inch, chain still on. "Can I help you?" The man didn't answer. Snow collected on his shoulders and hair, melting slowly down his face. He looked soaked but untouched by the cold. His eyes were wide, unblinking, reflecting the porch light like glass. "I'm lost," he said, finally. His voice was calm, flat, almost bored. "There's no road behind our house," I said. "You need to get back to the highway." He tilted his head slightly. "I already walked it. It keeps changing." Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. "I'll call someone for you," I said, reaching for my phone. "No," he said instantly, too fast. "Just let me warm up." Behind him, the snowstorm howled louder, like it was listening. I shook my head. "I can't. I'm sorry." The man stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was the wrong kind of smile. Too slow, too wide, like he was practicing it. "That's okay," he said. "I'll wait." He stepped off the porch, didn't walk away, just stepped down into the snow beside the house and disappeared from view. I locked the door, bolted it, and woke my parents. We stayed up until morning, lights on, listening to the storm batter the walls. At dawn, the snow finally eased. I opened the door.
The porch was buried, the yard untouched. No footprints leading to the house, no footprints leading away. Just one thing disturbed. The snow directly beneath my bedroom window had been packed down flat, like someone had stood there for hours, looking up. The sheriff later told us something quietly, like he didn't want the words to travel. 2 nights earlier, a man matching that description had knocked on doors closer to town during another storm. Different houses, same calm knocking. Nobody who opened their door saw him leave. One family let him inside. Their back door was found open the next morning. They never found him. They never found the dog either. I don't stay in that house anymore during winter storms, and when the knocking comes now, because sometimes it still does, in dreams and memory, I never answer.